Hi, so we're here today to talk to you about the Generation 4 International Forum Economic Modelling Working Group. I'm Fiona Reilly. I co-chair the EMWG with colleagues from Canada, Megan Moore, and colleagues from the US, Jason Hansen. By background, I'm a solicitor, I was practicing law for 20 years. I now have a wide portfolio of roles, but basically I'm a strategic advisor to really difficult, complex mega projects, nuclear or otherwise. Introduce yourself.
So I'm Nicky Davies. I'm a partner in an international law firm and I specialise in the development and financing of energy projects around the world. I'm a relatively new member of GIF, so really sort of getting to grips with what GIF is trying to do and working alongside Fiona very closely.
Thank you.
So maybe if we start, Fiona, I mean obviously as the newcomer, it would just be great to understand, what is GIF looking to do and how is GIF looking to support and enhance economic modelling and the financing of Gen 4 nuclear reactors. So what have you been doing to date and what's the plan going forward?
Thank you. It's a difficult question. It's a really difficult question. I mean, the GIF is based on an international treaty. So it's a challenging place to start getting governments and companies to come together. And it's also based on R&D. And for me, R&D needs to move to commercialisation, industrialisation, and how do we get there? The Economic Modelling Working Group is set up, to look at the economics of technologies and to look at techcos. We have the G4 Econs guidelines and model, which technology companies have historically used to try and put their technologies into a commercial financing setting. And we're updating that at the moment and moving that forward. We also have our ANSTAR reviews, which are looking at how we can save costs in Generation 4 through modularisation and building reactors in factories rather than on-site construction. Yeah. It's the dream, the ambition. And then the stuff I do, and you've been dragged in to do. So I have a financing background, a major projects background, and as you know, I have a lot of contacts in the finance industry. And there's no point in doing these things if you've not got those guys involved. Nuclear is phenomenally good at talking to itself, but we need to get out and talk to the financiers and other people who actually build these things and get them to happen. So, put together a financing task force in 2020. The first report we did was on making nuclear an ESG investable asset class. And we did that because the financiers said, we can't convince our boards this is investable. We're a bit stuck. And we're now doing more with that. So you were involved in the workshop in October we did. Would you like to talk about that?
No, so it was a great event and it was a really practical way, I think, of explaining to people within the nuclear industry what different types of financiers are looking for and what their considerations are when they're looking at any investable asset class, to be honest, and looking at it all the way through the development and sort of considerations, all the way through from proof of concept, all the way through to then having, first of a kind through to nth of a kind, and the different considerations and the different types of investors that will look at investing in different stages of project. And that's something that I think we can come on to a lot more because it's something that we've talked about quite a lot. I mean, I guess, perhaps if we jump back a bit, what do you think are the biggest challenges for the nuclear industry in terms of financing? What are the things that make financing nuclear projects more difficult? Are there things that make nuclear more difficult or not? I'm really interested to get your take on this. And again, I know a lot of it, but because we've spoken about it, but share your thoughts and I'll chip in as well.
So I have a real problem. Actually, no, we talked about it a lot over drinks as well as all the time, of people in the nuclear industry think nuclear is special. It's difficult. It's difficult because it's a major project. But some of the projects we've been involved in are just as difficult, more complex, still require government intervention. There are challenges. There has historically been a view that reputationally financiers didn't want to get involved in nuclear, but that's gone. That's changed. I mean, 3 years ago, I was still getting emails from people saying, hey, Fee, can you have a chat with this person? They'd like to understand nuclear a bit more. Now I'm getting emails saying, how do we invest in nuclear? How do we do this? What can we do? What can we do to help? That's not going to be without government intervention. It's not going to be without setting these projects up properly in the first place, which applies to not only nuclear but other major projects. We know that. So we need to work out how to set them up well, how to set them up robustly, how to move them forward quickly, bring some of that entrepreneurial spirit that we see in other projects to actually get things moving a bit, but also give governments the understanding of what they need to do, particularly on the first of a kind projects, to put supports in place, sovereign guarantees, etc., to take things forward.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I mean, financiers are used to having to look at new technology. That is not unique to the nuclear space. There are plenty of other projects out there where the technology is not yet proven, and that does bring challenges. But as I say, they're not unique to nuclear. The things that are unique to nuclear are some of the more sort of regulated aspects of nuclear. And yes, there's a certain amount of education that has to come around that in terms of the international norms, in terms of the 3 S's, the safety, the security, the safeguards, and all those things people need to understand within the financing sector. But at the end of the day, that's a little bit more on the education piece. The rest of it actually shares more similarities, perhaps, with major infrastructure and financing new technologies than perhaps we thought previously.
I think that's right. And the financiers are willing to look at this now. They're willing to say, yes, we will consider these projects, we will take them forward. But you talk about educating them. There's also a PR piece around this. Nuclear always brings up the waste issue, and we saw with the EU taxonomy, waste is a big issue. I look at waste in a slightly different way, and from a slightly different perspective. And I think financiers would as well, if we could get that dialogue going. So it's how do we engage them? How do we talk? Not try to speak down to them, which I have seen, but actually communicate, engage with them. Because for me, waste is, spent fuel is full of assets. Uranium, plutonium, that can be used on future projects. Why would we stick that in the ground? I understand all the issues with recycling, but we can get over those. We're now finding there's medical isotopes in nuclear waste. Let's find out what this is, what the value is there, and utilise it for the good of society going forward. So I think there's a PR piece around that as well. I think particularly with Gen 4 technology, there's a PR piece on you can't really have a nuclear incident like you could have done in the past. I'm not the person to talk about that. But I think there is a dialogue that needs to happen as well as a bit of an education.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, coming back to that discussion around, it is new technology, it's unproven technology. There are a whole sphere of different financial investors out there who will be interested in different stages of the development of, a Gen 4 reactor. Now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about is, well, who are we trying to reach? Who are the people that we're not reaching today? Who are the people that we need to be talking to cover all of the different bases? Because there are conventional lenders, but when we talk about the financial community, I think we tend to zero in on traditional conventional debt, but obviously there's an awful lot more sources of funding out there, and we've spoken a lot about the fact that you also have to look at the government piece. When you have challenging large infrastructure projects, and say not unique to nuclear, this goes for pretty much any sector where you've got significant capex, where you've got regulatory challenges and potentially, not yet proven technology, there's a role to play for government. So, keen to sort of get your thoughts on that from what you are seeing across technologies and specific challenges for the Gen 4 nuclear reactor technology.
I mean, there's so much in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Whoa, so much.
4 questions in one.
But there's also that, there were 600 small nuclear technologies in the world. I think is the latest number. It's probably more than that since, I last looked. We need some of these technologies to come together and work together. They're all trying to do the same thing. Can we get them to work together? I understand all the IP and the investment challenges with that. But there are things we can do around that. We're seeing it in fusion, actually, where companies are collaborating much more than they do in fusion, which is a really interesting debate. But then when it comes to, we talk in the GIF about engaging with industry. What is industry? The GIF seems to focus on the technology companies, and of course they're an important part of it.
Absolutely. Doesn't exist without them, but to get to the next level,
when you're putting a stakeholder map together, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. You've got local communities. You've got to look at benefits to local communities, benefits to the country. You've got to look at the different classes of investors, from the entrepreneurial philanthropists at one end through to the pension funds probably at the other. You've got the ECAs who are doing a phenomenal amount in nuclear at the moment. I think it's going below the radar a little bit, but we've seen projects where the ECAs are fully committed to these projects and they're about to sign, and that's on large reactors, never mind small. We need to involve them. We need to make sure governments are still supporting through the ECAs, and obviously political changes can be challenging around that. We need long-term government support, so government has to be involved. But people often, gosh, I can't speak this one, often think of one ministry. There's a whole range of ministries. You know, you've got economics, finance, you've got exports. We need to look at all these different players and bring them all together to make sure that everyone's talking. But we need to do that quickly. We need to stop some of the slow, ponderous even, way that we approach nuclear projects and say, right, how do we approach this? Just as we would any other mega project. And then consider if there's anything special about nuclear, which I think if there's anything, it's tiny.
Really interesting. So that is the mission for GIF in terms of, particularly as part of the economic modelling working group, is how to get that message out there, both in terms of looking at the economics and the modelling, but then looking at it from a financial investor point of view, and looking at all the different types of financial investors in terms of how are they going to see it and what kinds of investment are we looking to attract at different stages of development of the Gen 4 reactors, and how do we reach that audience and make sure that we're engaging in those conversations with those investors and not being too narrow in the way in which we look at that, but really looking to reach a wider audience.
And remembering that these technologies need to be competitive. We've got a global energy market, let's be realistic, and they need to compete with renewables. It's not a matter of one versus the other. They work together, but they've got to be competitive on price. So how do we achieve that in a regulated environment? We've done it in other industries, why can't we do it in this one?
That's such a great point, and I think we often forget, don't we, that it isn't an either or. We don't. Nuclear is not to the exclusion of the renewables and all the things that are happening in the renewable energy sector, but nuclear provides opportunities for more baseload power, for more grid balancing. There are many, many advantages of a nuclear technology that perhaps we're a little bit shy about bringing forward and actually talking about, because sometimes the challenges seem to be too big to overcome. And I think the message now coming out of GIF is that we need to really change that narrative a little bit and actually look at ways to at how we manage those better with the financial community.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing in GIF at the moment is a good example. So we've realised the NEA, IAEA, and other agencies, we're all working on the same things. We're all doing stuff on financing. So, oh my God, let's work together. So our next paper on financing is in collaboration with those other agencies, which I think is a huge leap forward.
Fantastic.
Thank you.